The White House calling fake news on the New York Times report claiming that the president asked James Comey to end the FBI's investigation of Michael Flynn, calling it neither truthful nor accurate.
Here to weigh in, former Director of Strategy for British Prime Minister David Cameron and Fox News contributor Steve Hilton, I believe, joins us from our nation's capital. Hey, Steve,
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm right here in the swamp. It's
You are. You're up to your eyeballs in swampland. Okay,
Yeah.
so this memo that Mr. Comey wrote after a meeting with the president in the Oval Office said of Michael Flynn, I hope you can let this go. There's a big difference between I hope and I order, isn't there?
Yes, I don't think you have to be a student of the law to see the difference. And I think it goes to the heart, not just of this story, but of so many of these stories we're seeing in the last few months, actually, ever since the president was inaugurated, which is there's a pattern. Remember that he was put in the White House by the American people precisely because he wasn't a professional politician. They had such a big choice of typical politicians. They had 16 Republicans, they had Hillary Clinton, but they didn't want any of that. They wanted someone who was different. Now, he gets there, and he's doing things differently, and he's not practiced in the art, some may say the spin of being a politician, so he speaks more freely. He's a different kind of person, and every time he does something that is in any way different from what people down here in D.C. are used to, they jump on it and magnify it and turn it into some kind of constitutional crisis. And what that's really doing, and the really big story here, is that it's getting in the way of his ability to govern. He was put there to bring about real change in people's lives. And you know what really makes me so angry about all this is the way that the people who are attacking the administration are just loving the sound of their own outrage. But where is their outrage about the people who are looking for work, people who've got work but can't afford to live on what they earn, people with kids in failing schools? There's so many things going wrong, but there's no outrage about that. All that is really hard to fix. They say, well, we can't do tax reform, that's really difficult, we can't do healthcare reform, we can't do any of these things. But it's so easy for them to jump up and down on these scandals and these Washington games. It's really sickening.
But Steve, it's like a soap opera's on and it has high ratings, but the Midwest and the South is not watching the soap opera, and they're wondering when they're going to get to the reality show, which is our reality show. But I will say this, having said all that, the president contradicting his own staff, the communication people being undercut by the president's words the next day from McMaster to Spicer, these are all self-inflicted wounds. Even with the sharks around, there's a way to avoid the sharks, and the president hasn't done a good job avoiding them.
Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of these are own goals, but they're not the kind of massive constitutional failings that the critics of the administration make them out to be. But he's got to understand that I think something serious is going on here. I think that the elite, the establishment, they really do want to get him out. They don't think that the result of the election was legitimate. They don't want to wait till 2020. They want to get him out. That threatens not just his agenda, but the real interests of all the people that voted for him and our viewers watching at home with these real problems in their lives. So he's got to understand that and therefore not give them any more ammunition.
I think everyone knew that was going to happen. Karl Rove, who wasn't a fan of President Trump's, he even said it's because he has an R behind his name. What do you expect from the mainstream media? But what is your advice to the president? How can he, with the messaging issues, what advice, if you were in the Oval Office with him, what would you say to him?
I think that the number one thing is that he's got to push ahead with a strong, clear, positive agenda for change. Now, I know that they will say they're doing things every day that are making a difference. Fine, but they're the small things that actually don't tell a real story of the big shake-up that he was elected to deliver. I think he's got to get back and have an energetic agenda for really shaking things up and to show the people that he's delivering his promises.
Steve, the Trump people sent out an email to supporters yesterday, and in the subject line it said sabotage. And the body of it reads, you already knew the media was out to get us, but sadly, it's not just fake news. There are people within our own unelected bureaucracy that want to sabotage President Trump and our entire America First movement.
That is undoubtedly true, and by the way, it is not unique to this administration. I personally experienced that in the government role that I played back in the UK many years ago. And actually,
you were sabotaged.
That's what. And actually, do you know who told me that? Tony Blair. Tony Blair, the Prime Minister of the UK, who I spoke to before we entered number 10 Downing Street, he said to me very clearly, it was a private meeting, but as many years have passed, so I can share it now. He said, you've got to understand, exactly, you've got to understand that the civil service, the permanent bureaucracy, they really do believe that they are the true guardians of the national interest, and that it's their job to sabotage these here today, gone tomorrow politicians from screwing things up. That's their mindset. And so that I imagine that is happening even more with this administration than most, but that is how they think.
Right. I just think that the president could react to this by getting a Josh Bolton or Steve Hadley with a lot of experience in there that knows how to win these games, not argue with the refs. Just win. Don't complain about the field conditions. Don't complain about what's going on. Find a way to win. And you got to adjust your game. Here's what everybody's saying about it. Tech Twitter writes on this on Twitter. That's the thing. There is no proof and hearsay in just that. Evidence a self-written memo does not make. That's true. You can write anything in a memo. It doesn't mean it was right.
Raphael on Twitter says President Trump needs the support of we the people to move forward with law and order in America. Jobs.
Also on Twitter, Elizabeth writes, we need the truth. I think Comey is lying. Steve, your final thoughts about Mr. Comey's memo?
I think that, you know, now we are where we are. We've got to see it. We've got to get all this out in the open, because I think what needs to happen is for finally all these distractions and scandals and innuendo and rumor to try and put that behind us and get on with these really important policy questions. How are we going to bring jobs back? How are we going to raise incomes? How are we going to improve schools? How are we going to have people have affordable health care? These things are what matter, and we've got to get there soon, and the only way to do that, I think, regrettably, is to get everything out there, have an inquiry, have an investigation, give people what they want, and then we can move on.
Right, and by the way, the market's suffering right now because they're losing faith that any agenda is going to get going, so people are losing money. Steve Hilton, thanks so much.
Thanks, Steve.
Great to be with you.
Great to see you.